Welcome to Marshal Myths, presented by the United States Marshals Museum. I am David Kennedy, Museum Curator. In this episode, I will talk about the first female deputy. This falls under the status of fact check. Here at the Marshals Museum, we often receive inquiries about the various firsts in the history of the Office of U.S. Marshal. One common question is, who was the first female deputy marshal? Many women have worn the badge more than most people realize, and many women have gone on to senior leadership positions across the organization, including that of director. Before I continue, I want to stress the recounting of this history should in no way be taken as an attempt to belittle anyone's service, reputation, or achievements. Most of the claims you will hear about were made by the relevant district, not by the women in question. They served honorably and did most of the same tasks performed by the male deputies, limited only by the gender bias seen in much of American history. But back to the question, who was first? I will go back through history, looking at women who were called first. However, these claims were often the result of an organization with no real central authority or records keeping until the middle part of the 20th century. Historically, each marshal's office had little oversight from the Attorney General's office and for the most part reported only necessary information. This was also a time with no computer databases, searchable archives, or electronic references. Word of mouth carried a lot of weight and fact-checking rarely occurred. And in line with the political nature of the office, many incoming marshals replaced all of their predecessors' deputies upon taking office. After a few staff rollovers, no one could recall the presence of previous women serving in the office. As an example, Chalice Dales was legitimately the first woman deputy U.S. Marshal in Nevada in 1923, but was not, as claimed at her retirement, the first in the nation. May Bainton, hired as the first in the Eastern District of New York in 1937, was preceded by several women, with Emily Dixon likely being the first in New York City in 1898. In some cases, the lack of communication between districts became apparent. Betty K. Smith, a deputy in the Southern District of California, was hailed in 1935 as the first woman deputy in the state. However, by this point, the Northern District of California had already employed at least 6 women in this capacity. Helen Crawford, a deputy in 1934, made the odd claim not to be the first, but the second in her district. She may have been told of one predecessor in the Eastern District of Texas, but several other women had worked in the district as well, including one you will hear about in a minute. Lola Anderson, hailed in papers across the country as the first woman deputy after being hired in Colorado in 1917, may never have heard of Maggie McGrew, who took the oath in that district in 1897. Ada Kernut is often held up as a famous example of an early deputy. At some point in 1890 or 1891, she took a position as clerk in the Oklahoma Territory in the Norman Division Office. She gained some national attention in March 1893 for being a lady deputy escorting 2 male prisoners by train from Norman to Guthrie, the territorial capital. At the same time Kernut was active in Oklahoma Territory, Fannie Miller worked in Indian Territory in 1891. Assigned out of the Eastern District of Texas, she rode with her cousin, Deputy Ben Cantrell. She was likely the first female deputy to actually ride in the field. Neither Kernut nor Miller were mentioned in the news at the time as being firsts. With that, we may have reached the earliest known female deputy U.S. Marshal, Phoebe Couzins, the daughter of the U.S. Marshal for the Eastern District of Missouri. She was one of the first female lawyers in the United States and an early suffragist. Her father appointed her as the deputy marshal in 1884, the earliest example we found of a woman named to this position. Upon her father's death in 1887, Phoebe acted as the interim marshal until Congress approved the new marshal. At this point, some viewers may be asking questions about Alice Eads, a woman listed occasionally as the first female deputy in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Alice made claims that she became a deputy in 1881 after the murder of her husband. However, there are no sources to support this claim beyond an interview with her in the 1930s. Most historians have since dismissed her claims. It is doubtful that this history started in the 1880s and that we know all of their stories. We fully expect other women served earlier, but we have not yet found their names and may never know who was in fact first. Regardless, they were all trailblazers and they all did an amazing job given the limitations and bias of the period. If you have questions about this video or have a Marshals myth you would like explored, please contact the museum by following the links below. Thank you for watching.